yoga, I mean, it's everywhere, right? You see it, hear it, studios on every corner.
Yeah.
Maybe you've even, tried a class or two yourself.
Yeah.
But have you ever, like, really stopped and thought, what does that word even mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, beyond the poses and the stretching, what's the real deal with yoga? What are we diving into today?
Today we're going deep, way beyond just, touching your toes.
Right.
We're going to get to the core of it. What does yoga actually mean?
Yeah.
How is it defined? What's it supposed to do for you? What gets in the way?
Oh, yeah.
And then we're going to look at how one really fascinating philosophical system, Advaita Vedanta, sees it all, especially through like their take on the Bhagavad Gita and what all those commentators on Patanjali had to say.
Buckle up, everybody, because
Yeah.
Get ready for some serious aha moments, because that's where we're headed.
Absolutely.
And our main guidebook for this whole exploration, the Yoga Aphorisms of Patanjali.
Classic.
Yeah, we're talking the OG yoga manual.
Yeah.
And we're going to be paying extra attention to how some of the classical thinkers like Buddha, how they interpreted all these ancient ideas.
Yeah, Buddha's got some really interesting insights there.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. What is yoga? Like at its most basic fundamental level?
Well, if you ask Boja, and he's like, a major voice in understanding Patanjali,
Right.
He boils it all down to this: an effort to separate the Atman, the reality, from the non-Atman, the apparent.
Okay.
So think of it like it's about learning to tell the difference between what's really permanent, your core self, and everything else that, seems real, but it's constantly changing, temporary.
So someone who's really trying to make that distinction.
Yeah.
To see through the, the surface level stuff.
Yeah.
Would they be what we'd call a yogi?
Bingo. That's your yogi. Someone engaged in that practice and that process of figuring out what's real, what's not.
Now, Patanjali himself, he gives us this really key definition, right? And it's all about what's going on inside our heads.
It's all about the mind. He says yoga is the control of thought waves in the mind, citta.
The citta.
But to really get what he means, we got to break down this mind thing a little bit.
Yeah.
He's got 3 parts to it: manas, buddhi, hamkar.
All right, so manas, is that like the part that just takes everything in?
Right.
All the input?
Precisely. Think of it like the record button on your brain, always on, capturing everything your senses are picking up: sights, sounds, smells, the whole sensory world. No filter yet, just raw data.
Okay, and then buddhi steps in and makes sense of it all.
Exactly. Buddhi is the sorting hat, the librarian. It takes all that raw data from manas and starts organizing it. Like what's important, what's not, what do we do with this information?
Okay, so it's making the call, and then we got ahamkara. That sounds a lot like ego to me.
You got it. Ahamkar is the eye maker.
It takes what Buddhi has sorted out and slaps a big mind sticker on it.
My knowledge, my experience. It personalizes everything.
So, like if manas registers large object approaching,
Right.
buddhi goes, hey, that's a bull.
Yeah, based on all the bulls we've seen before.
And then Amkar is like, that bull is looking at me.
And I know that because I am me.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, so how does getting a handle on these thought waves, this whole manas, buddhi, ahamkar dance, how does that actually like improve our lives? How does it connect to realizing the Atman?
This is where it gets really interesting. So every time we experience something, a thought wave pops up in the mind.
Right.
And our ego, that ahamkara, grabs onto that wave. If it's a pleasant thought, I got a raise.
I am happy.
Exactly. I am happy. Unpleasant thought, I missed the bus.
I am miserable.
I am unhappy. I am frustrated. And Patanjali saying this whole identifying with the ups and downs, that's the root of suffering.
Yeah, because even when it's a good feeling, it doesn't last, right? And then we're afraid of losing it. We cling to it.
We grasp.
And it just creates more anxiety.
More suffering. And it keeps us from realizing the Atman, our true self. Because the Atman, it's untouched by all that mental back and forth. It's just pure, enlightened, free, and the source of a happiness that doesn't depend on, getting a raise or missing a bus.
So as long as we're stuck in that habit of, like, this thought means I'm this emotion means I'm that,
right?
We're missing out on that solid, joyful core of who we really are.
We're missing the whole point. And this is where the Bhagavad Gita comes in with that great line: yoga is the breaking of contact with pain.
I love that.
It's about stopping that misidentification that causes all the trouble.
And this is where, like, the image of the lake comes in, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. The commentators use this image of a lake to explain it all.
Mhm.
So imagine a lake. If the surface is all choppy, waves everywhere, and the water's all muddy, You can't see the bottom, right?
Nope.
The lake is our mind. The bottom of the lake is the Atman. And all those uncontrolled thought waves, that's the choppiness, the mud.
Obscuring the view.
Blocking our view of what's really there.
So it's not enough to just like calm the surface a little bit.
Nope.
We got to get it totally still and clear so we can finally see what's always been there underneath.
That's the goal.
Now, there's this common idea about yoga, that it's about like emptying your mind, making it go totally blank.
Yeah, like a mental power wash.
Is that what Patanjali is talking about?
Not at all. He's not saying, suppress all your thoughts, force your mind into a vacuum. That'll just create more tension.
So just trying to like switch off your brain completely,
Yeah.
not the goal.
Definitely not. What Patanjali's getting at is much deeper. He says it's about unlearning the false identification of the thought waves with the ego sense.
So it's like a fundamental rewiring of our mental habits.
You got it. A total transformation.
In the text, they even compare it to St. Paul's idea of like the renewal of the mind.
Oh, yeah. Great comparison. It's about changing our character at the deepest level, shifting those ingrained patterns of thinking and reacting.
Now, everyone's starting this journey with a different kind of mind,
But
right?
everyone's different.
Some people are all over the place, scattered.
Restless.
Some are maybe more sluggish, unmotivated.
Yeah.
Some maybe just fixated on the pleasant stuff, avoiding the hard things.
Avoiding the shadows.
So it's not like you have to be a certain type of person to start practicing yoga.
Not at all. Patanjali believed every mind, no matter what state it's in,
Yeah.
has the potential to be disciplined, to be transformed. It can become one-pointed, focused enough for real, deep yoga.
That's encouraging.
Yeah,
It means we don't have to wait till we're already like perfectly zen to start working on it.
exactly. Start where you are.
Now, this next idea, this kind of surprised me when I first encountered it in the text.
Yeah.
Even good thought waves,
Okay.
like pure truthful thoughts,
Yeah,
those eventually need to be transcended too.
that's right.
Why is that?
So this might sound counterintuitive, especially coming from like a typical Western viewpoint where we're all about positive thinking, right?
Yeah, good vibes only.
Right, exactly. But the reasoning here is that even the most beautiful, the most moral aspects of the external world,
Hmm.
they're still ultimately superficial, temporary, not the fundamental reality, not the Atman.
So even striving for noble goals, having virtuous thoughts,
Yeah.
in a way, those are still distractions from the ultimate truth.
There's still movements in the mind. Think about
Well-
someone who dedicates their life to helping others. That's a beautiful thing, right?
Absolutely.
But if their mind is always churning with anxiety about the problems
Mm.
or frustration with the lack of progress, they haven't found that inner stillness yet.
Yeah.
The truly enlightened, they know the peace of the Atman is within everything, even within suffering. Their calmness isn't indifference. It's this deep understanding of the unchanging reality beneath it all.
So it's not about a lack of feeling. It's about where our deepest sense of value and love is rooted, moving it from the temporary to the eternal.
That's a great way to put it. And the text actually talks about how loving the Atman within yourself,
Yeah?
that naturally extends to loving it everywhere.
Beautiful. So it's not just like shutting off your emotions. It's about shifting where that love is directed. Okay, the text goes on to outline 5 different kinds of thought waves. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. So Patanjali identifies 5 main categories: right knowledge, wrong knowledge, verbal delusion, sleep, and memory.
Okay, right knowledge seems pretty straightforward. It's basically knowing things as they are.
Right. And Patanjali breaks this down further into 3 ways we get right knowledge. Direct perception through our senses, as long as they're not clouded by delusion.
Right.
Inference, which is drawing correct conclusions based on what we perceive.
Mm-hmm.
And scriptural testimony. That's the wisdom passed down from enlightened teachers. And this knowledge, it can ultimately be verified through your own direct experience.
So you're not just taking someone's word for it blindly.
No, you got to test it out yourself.
Then we've got wrong knowledge. Basically the opposite of right knowledge, I assume.
Pretty much, it's false knowledge. Seeing things in a way that doesn't line up with reality. Like the classic example.
Yeah.
You see a rope in the dark, think it's a snake.
Oh, yeah.
That wrong knowledge leads to fear, to reactions that don't make sense.
Yeah, makes sense. What about verbal delusion? That one sounds kind of tricky.
So verbal delusion is when words or labels don't actually reflect reality.
Okay.
Like, imagine someone says, all swans are white, but they've only ever seen white swans.
Right.
They're creating a verbal delusion because they're ignoring the possibility of black swans.
Because there are black swans.
There are black swans, The words create this false sense of knowing everything.
So it's like a disconnect between language and what's actually true.
Exactly. And then we have sleep and memory, which are a little more straightforward.
Yeah.
Sleep is when those thought waves are kind of on pause, and memory is just recalling past thought waves, bringing them back up.
So really understanding these different types of mental activity helps us become more aware of what's going on in our own heads, right?
Absolutely.
Which is like the first step to getting control.
Awareness is key.
Now, how do we actually do that? Like, what does practicing yoga look like?
Okay, so here's the thing. Getting lasting control over those thought waves, the kind that leads to real insight, takes consistent practice over a long time.
Not a quick fix.
Not a quick fix. Can't just do a weekend retreat and come out transformed.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. It requires dedication, genuine enthusiasm, can't give up easily. And the text also talks a lot about non-attachment.
Ah, yes. Non-attachment. What does that mean in this context of yoga practice?
So non-attachment, for Patanjali, it's a form of self-mastery.
Okay.
It's about freeing yourself from those intense desires for things you see and hear in the world. You know, all those cravings.
Yeah.
Our mind's energy can flow outward, driven by those desires. I want this, I need that.
Yeah.
Or it can flow inward towards self-knowledge. Who am I really?
That's a good point.
And both consistent practice and cultivating non-attachment, they're essential. They got to work together.
Because if you just try to suppress all your desires
Right.
without having anything positive to focus on, that could backfire.
Oh, absolutely. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You're just creating more tension, more struggle.
The text even warns about the dangers of just being rigidly negative.
Yeah, it can be counterproductive. Non-attachment isn't about becoming cold or indifferent to the world.
Right.
It's actually, at its highest level, it comes from this deep understanding of the Atman. You recognize that same self in everyone, everything.
Right.
And your desires for any one particular thing just naturally diminish.
So it's not a lack of feeling. It's a shift in where our deepest sense of value and love resides.
Exactly, from the temporary to the eternal.
And the text even says that, loving the Atman within yourself naturally extends to loving it everywhere.
It's a love that sees beyond the surface, connects with that fundamental reality.
Now, of course, as we're trying to cultivate all this, the practice, the non-attachment,
Right.
we're going to hit some roadblocks.
Oh, yeah. There's going to be obstacles.
What are some of the common distractions that Patanjali points out?
So he lists 9 major obstacles to gaining this deeper knowledge. He calls them Viennas. Viennas. And these include things like physical sickness, mental lethargy, lack of motivation, doubt, lack of enthusiasm for the practice itself, plain old laziness or sloth,
Oh, yeah.
craving for those sensory pleasures, misinterpreting things, having false perceptions, feeling hopeless when you don't see immediate progress, and just being inconsistent with your concentration.
Wow, that's a pretty comprehensive list of things that can trip us up.
It's a lot to watch out for. And the text also points out that these mental and physical obstacles, they often come with all sorts of negative emotions, grief, despair, even physical symptoms like trembling, irregular breathing.
So it's like the whole system is out of whack.
Yeah, things are not in harmony.
It seems like a lot of these, they boil down to just feeling stuck.
Yeah.
The text specifically calls out sloth as a major hurdle.
Sloth is a big one. It's that heavy inertia.
Yeah.
And it can lead to all sorts of negative thinking, even manifests as physical ailments, almost like the body's resisting the effort of change.
But the text gives this really interesting suggestion for tackling sloth. Japam.
Right. Japam. That's the repetition of sacred sounds or words, like mantras.
Mantras, okay.
And doing this consistently, quietly, it can work on a deeper level, almost subconsciously, to kind of chip away at that inertia.
Okay.
And ultimately, Patanjali says all these obstacles, they can be overcome by focusing our concentration on a single unifying principle.
So like one pointed focus, sticking with one path, one practice.
Yeah. The commentators often interpret this principle as the divine reality, the core truth of existence.
There's that analogy, right, of digging one deep well to find water instead of digging a bunch of shallow holes.
Exactly. It's about depth over breadth.
Okay, so we've got a good sense of what yoga means according to Patanjali, some of the challenges involved. Now, how does Advaita Vedanta, especially through its understanding of the Bhagavad Gita, how does it engage with all this?
So Advaita Vedanta, it brings in this really fundamental principle that the individual self, the Atman, and the ultimate universal reality, Brahman,
Okay.
They're essentially one and the same.
One and the same.
The text you shared uses this great analogy from Christianity, describing God as both immanent, meaning present within everything,
Okay.
and transcendent, meaning beyond everything, to illustrate this idea of a single reality with different aspects.
So it's like Patanjali's approach is more of a scientific method, outlining techniques and potential results.
Yeah, very systematic.
But Advaita Vedanta, it's providing that broader philosophical framework.
The bigger picture.
Yeah, the bigger picture.
And Patanjali does even mention the possibility of like developing certain powers through practice.
Right, the siddhis.
The cities, yeah. But he warns against getting attached to them.
Because they can become a distraction.
Exactly. They can sidetrack you from the real goal, which is realizing your oneness with the Atman.
What would you say is the highest state of concentration from this Advaita Vedanta perspective?
So the highest state, it goes beyond focusing on any specific object, even a subtle one.
Wow.
It's a concentration on consciousness itself, realizing you are the Atman.
Okay.
This requires total stillness of the thought waves, clearing out all those samskaras,
Samskaras.
those deep-seated impressions, the subconscious stuff that drives our habits and desires.
And those are what keep us bound to this cycle of birth and death, right?
Exactly. So achieving yoga, liberation, means uprooting those samskaras.
And liberation doesn't necessarily mean your physical body dies right away, right?
Not necessarily. Someone who's achieved that state can still live and act in the world, but their actions are described as burnt seeds.
Burnt seeds.
Yeah, it's a powerful image. They still happen, but they don't have that same karmic weight. No power to create new attachments, new bondage. Shankara, one of the key Advaita thinkers, he compares these actions to remembered actions of a dream.
That's a great image.
Ah.
It's like they're happening, but they don't have that same impact.
They don't stick.
The text also makes this distinction between concentration with non-attachment and concentration without non-attachment.
Yeah, there's a big difference in the outcome.
What's the crucial difference there?
So concentration that's paired with deep non-attachment, that leads to true liberation, to realizing your identity with the Atman.
Okay.
But concentration driven by even subtle desires for power, for specific experiences, that only leads to temporary states, like merging with aspects of nature or attaining the level of certain deities.
So you might achieve impressive mental states, maybe even gain some cool abilities,
Yeah.
but you're still within the realm of prakriti, the manifested world.
Still bound by its limitations.
And eventually, it all changes. The text even talks about how the Hindu understanding of heaven and hell, those are temporary realms within this manifested reality. They're shaped by our karma, but they're not the ultimate destination.
Not the end game.
Being reborn in the human realm, that's actually seen as the real opportunity for yoga, for realizing the Atman.
That's where the real work can happen. And it's interesting, even powerful beings like those strong gods mentioned in the text,
Yeah.
they were still considered bound to prakriti to some degree because they still have desires. Desires for power, for maintaining their position.
So true freedom is beyond even that.
It lies in transcending all desires, realizing your oneness with the Atman.
Now, how does Advaita Vedanta, with its emphasis on this ultimate oneness, how does it differ from, or even like implicitly refute some of the core ideas in Patanjali's yoga philosophy?
It's not so much a direct refutation as it is a subtle shift in perspective.
Yeah.
Patanjali's system really emphasizes the effort of the individual mind to control its thoughts, achieve liberation as the seemingly separate entity.
Right. The individual's doing the work.
Exactly. But Advaita Vedanta, it points to this reality where that sense of separate individuality, it's ultimately an illusion.
It's not really there.
It's not fundamental. So perfect yoga, in the highest Advaitic understanding, isn't about the mind controlling itself. It's about realizing that you are that underlying consciousness. You are the Atman Brahman.
So it's not about achieving something you don't already have.
It's about recognizing what you already are.
And Patanjali actually talks about this state called seedless samadhi, right?
He does, yeah.
Which is a state beyond even the subtlest thoughts.
Beyond all objects of concentration.
That seems to align with this non-dual understanding, right?
Absolutely. It hints at this state that transcends the whole subject-object split.
So while Patanjali's 8 limbs offer this practical path,
A rope.
Advaita Vedanta ultimately says, hey, the destination isn't a state you achieve. It's recognizing this oneness that was always already there.
You're not becoming something new. You're realizing what's always been true.
Okay, so even with this difference in perspective,
Yeah.
Advaita Vedanta still seems to really value and utilize those yogic practices that Patanjali outlines.
Oh, absolutely. They're seen as essential.
How does that work?
So even though Advaita Vedanta doesn't buy into this idea of a permanently separate ego achieving liberation on its own,
Yeah.
it sees the practices of yoga, the concentration, the non-attachment, the ethical disciplines, which we haven't really gotten into today,
Right.
as crucial for purifying the mind.
Okay.
They help remove the obstacles, the ignorance, the egoism, all those attachments that cloud our perception and prevent us from seeing our true nature.
So it's like these practices, they're spring cleaning for the mind.
Yeah, a mental detox. They clear out the clutter so the truth can shine through.
They're considered Kriya Yoga, right?
Yeah, that's right. Actions that actively work towards that ultimate goal of yoga.
Self-realization.
Self-realization.
And the text mentions austerity, study, dedication of the fruits of one's work to God
Yeah.
as like initial steps in that Kriya Yoga.
They help build focus, clarity, and it's interesting, the text also compares these obstacles that yoga aims to overcome to the Christian idea of sin.
Oh, yeah. How does that comparison work?
So the perspective is a bit different. In the Hindu tradition, especially Advaita Vedanta, these obstacles, they're primarily seen as veils of ignorance.
Oh, yeah.
They're obscuring our true nature as the Atman. Whereas the Christian concept of sin, it's often about transgressing against an external God.
So it's more about removing internal blocks than like atoning for external wrongdoings.
That's a good distinction.
Wow, this has been a really, really insightful dive into the depths of yoga.
Mm-hmm.
So just to recap,
Yeah.
yoga, as we've seen through Patanjali, through those classical commentators, it's way more than just physical postures.
Hence an inner journey.
It's about getting a handle on that constant mental chatter and ultimately realizing the Atman, our true, unchanging self.
And it offers some pretty incredible benefits.
Yeah, like freedom from suffering, inner peace, enlightenment.
All that good stuff.
But it's not without its challenges.
Yeah.
Patanjali makes that clear.
We got to be prepared to face those obstacles.
Consistent practice, non-attachment.
Mm.
Those are key. And then we've got Advaita Vedanta, which ultimately points to this non-dual reality.
Beyond the separate self.
But it still sees the immense value in those yogic disciplines.
Yeah, they're crucial for prepping the mind, for clearing the path.
So as you go about your day, think about this. How does your understanding of control change when you realize the goal isn't about a separate self trying to manage its thoughts, but about recognizing that fundamental oneness?
It's a whole different way of looking at it.
How might that shift your whole perspective on your inner world, on the nature of reality itself? Something to ponder.
Definitely something to ponder.